All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pursuit of Relentless podcast. Today, we are going to make some noise. We might ruffle a couple feathers today, no pun intended, because we're talking to Mandy, who is a farmer out in Boyle, Alberta, and maybe just outside Boyle, Alberta. But anyways, I'm really grateful to have you back on the show because I think you are doing things right in your business. And there's so much that I want to talk about that's like somewhat controversial, but I'm like, we need to get this information out to people because there's a lot of fuckery happening in the world right now. And I think that we are the people who can make a difference. So welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. You're very patient, and I appreciate that very much because I think what you're doing is vital because a lot of people don't have the skills or the technology to do this well, and you produce a fabulous show.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you for being you because every cog in the wheel of the movement matters. And the movement is simply to actually have small farmers that exist in the future.
Exactly.
And I think there's a lot of pieces of that puzzle that aren't talked about because it's not necessarily simple to talk about.
Yeah. A lot of people are like, oh, I just go to the grocery store for my meals. And I'm like, okay, which is great. Sure. But do you know where your food's coming from? Do you know how stressed it is? Do you know how those hormones actually transfer into your body and how much your food actually impacts you? And a lot of people are just like, well, I just can't afford to eat healthy. I hear that all the time. And it's true. I went to the grocery store the other day and I typically buy meat from a local farmer, but I had some chicken at the store this time and it was a $440 bill. And it's me in my household and my husband, like who commutes every week. So I'm like, how do people survive when it's just like, it feels like it's a constant cycle of why aren't we eating enough food or like, why am I not full, versus eating food from a farmer.
Well,
it's not
our theme this year. That's right. There's some interesting things on our website that I'd like to talk to you a little bit about. And that is that the Hope Rebellion is our theme this year. And what we tell people is when you support a small farmer, it is an active rebellion against corporate profiteering in our food system. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, corporations have to make money. They employ people and they do all of these things. But in food, it's a little bit of a different story. And so that's something that I like to explain to people. Alaina, a lot of the things that you just talked about are absolutely things that can be organized when you have a relationship with a farmer. This time of the year, I try and tell people, tell me how many chickens to grow for you. Sort out what you would like for chicken, whether that be, you want to have chicken wings twice a month. Well, we can get you those chicken wings. Or that you like to use an air fryer because you have time constraints. Well, we can help you with those chicken breasts and put it in the air fryer. This year, our incredible friend, Twyla Campbell, who was a food reviewer for the CBC for like 20 years, it was incredible. I can't believe I just said that word twice in a row now. I listen to a lot of books, and whenever there's lots of repetition, it's just so annoying. So if I repeat too much, usually incredulous is the word that they use too often. But Twyla just laid out exactly. She's like, I annihilated this first package of chicken breasts because I tried to cook it like store-bought chicken. But then she gave a step-by-step instruction of how she had juicy, incredible chicken breasts done in an air fryer, which is great because it does take that village and sharing that knowledge. And so those of us in the world that have land, that want to grow food, the best and most simplistic way to help people eat healthier is to plan. You tell us what to grow for you and we could make that work. And even in your situation, I know through the Farmers Union in BC, there are farmers that I can connect you with that will grow food for you. So when we're done this, I'm going to hook you up because there's a lot of great stuff happening in BC, that pertains to how you butcher. They have mobile butchering, way more access than we do in Alberta. In Alberta, it's starting, but the cost of production is still something that it's kind of by nature that people like to get the best deal they can.
Right.
But when you look at the overall picture for what you're paying into that $440 bill, somebody's making a lot of money and it isn't the primary producers.
Right.
And so the only thing that will change that, whether it be government policy, lots of the right-wing side like to blame everything on the carbon tax, that has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with the fact that there's not a lot of competition. And we've given all the power to the corporations in our food system, and they can do whatever they want. They can force the grower to use those hormones and produce really fast so that at the end of the day, they still make a profit. But if consumers rise up, if consumers demand a different food system, the system will be adapted. So really it's the consumer's game to direct here. It's not they're not the victim of this.
Right.
They have to pay attention. And they might not like me saying that, but I was at this hockey game last night and I was looking at one section and I thought everyone in that one section bought from my co-op twice a year and bought from me twice a year, how different my life would be. You know, while they're buying $10 beers, bitching about all this shit, but so I didn't mean to swear,
That's
but they're
okay.
bitching about the cost of everything. But they're sitting at this hockey game. I've been told lately I'm very self-righteous, and that scares me because I think you're the most wrong when you're the most righteous. So I try to just question that, right? But it's people who want to pay attention to it. I was asked to do an outline for a very good magazine in Alberta a year ago. And I've been working hard in my brain going, how does one talk about this in a way that they can relate to? And really, it's called the 100-Year Experiment. So this part of the country was settled by people who left oppression, who left fascism, who left tyranny, and they wanted access to land and they wanted access to food. Well, in 100 years, ladies and gentlemen, we have screwed it up because access to land for most people is not possible. And why is that? And the control of the food system, from the genetics to the processing to the retail, is controlled by just a few companies. And so we have to be accountable for the system that we've enabled, whether that be through governments that have been influenced by lobbyists or, the story is simple. If you want food that's produced in a fair, ethical way, do the work. Take a little bit of time out of your pie in your life and do the work. And so our message is join the Hope Rebellion. And I often think, what would I have done in the resistance? And I'm sure I wouldn't fricking telling people to grow food. I'm sure I wouldn't be that different. But when you think about this, right, it really is a resistance.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot for non-Hutterite farms over the next decade.
Right.
And that is scary. There's a lot of people talking about, growing a little bit of vegetables here. And some people are growing small amounts of chickens, and it's great. And my hope is to mentor as many people as possible, but to know that you've got to be thinking 3, 5, 7, 10 years ahead in all of the planning that you do on a farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so building those bridges between consumers and farmers needs help. And there is no silver bullet. Word of mouth is ultimately the best way to sustain small farmers.
Yeah. Well, even here, I was talking to a lady. I got some hay off of a farmer here, and she actually ships it from Alberta, which is awesome. She just has a big barn full of hay and she sells it year round, which is fantastic. Because then when it comes to like growing garlic or stuff like that, or putting it in my raised beds, like it's just adding nutrients to my soil and stuff like that. But she said that she raises, I believe they're called mouflon sheep. And she said she's non-GMO and they're super low fat, so they don't have that really muttony taste. And I was like, I want to get some of that, right? And she's like,
well, you should.
I already got some because I wanted to make
Good.
free, so I did that. But she said she raises chicken as well for eggs and for meat. And I was like, that's amazing. And she's like, yeah. And I think we're one of the only farms in town that is 100% self-sustaining. And I was like, wow. So her and her little family, she has 3 kids, they run the farm, and it's only like, I think it's like a 5-acre plot, and she's got her animals and she feeds them all from the food that she's grown. I am just like sitting there going, that's like my dream life, right? I'm like, this is amazing. I love this. She's like, we never go to the grocery store. We eat everything that we grow on our farm and we can it or we dry it or whatever they need to do. And I just sit there and I go, wow. And she's like, yeah, it's almost like a lost cause in the sense that we can almost not sustain this lifestyle anymore because of the cost of certain things going up, like taxes, right? And I look at that, we're just really like defeated by that. So like I just moved to BC because Fort McMurray, where I was, the growing season is like, maybe I'll get a cup of potatoes, and that's about it, right? Like I could grow some maybe tomatoes and stuff like that, but it wasn't enough to sustain my life, right? And so now you see where we can grow all year round, and I'm like, well, this is cool. So now I'm like taking my birthday this weekend. So I'm like taking this weekend, my sister's coming over. She's got a 5-acre plot. She just planted her own orchard and like has a lot of knowledge when it comes to growing her own food. And I'm like, teach me everything. Like, I just want to learn everything because like I want to have my own chickens. I want to be able to, just like produce for myself and not have to go to a grocery store. And there's so many cool farmers here that are like, let's do it because it's needed.
Absolutely. And you start small. There's so many things I did wrong for a really long time, and I still do a little bit wrong. Like I broke my water hydrant. I'm pretty sure because I was impatient and I kept pulling on it. And now there's a big job and could cost me a few $1,000s. I hope it doesn't, but it might. But I think that, nobody needs to go into everything with these expectations that if you do a little bit, you have to go to the grocery store sometimes. Like I love tomatoes year round. And so there's no, I can't grow enough tomatoes to get tomatoes in January, right? But there's a really great cooperative in Alberta called Red Hat Co-op that I get those tomatoes from,
Cool.
at our co-op that are super important. And if you look at what Quebec did, right around 2015, is they invested billions of dollars into a system where they have enough greenhouse capacity that they have reduced the amount of imports of anything fruit and vegetable related over 50 or less than 50%. And within 5 years, they will be 100% import free. And so it's interesting that you bring up taxes, right? Because everybody likes to say, well, taxes are going up in this. And obviously, food is quite political. But regular working people and regular consumers, particularly when it comes to food, are paying a lot more so that corporations can pay a lot less.
Right.
And I think people need to understand that. The distribution of wealth and the distribution of taxes is a complicated conversation and one that I don't want to get in.
Because Mandy has a great
Okay,
story.
so I got to tell you about George, right? When you talk about learning, I love your enthusiasm, but a lot of these things, hon, you just got to learn as you do. I'll never lift my hydrant again until I know for sure there's no way it's frozen, like after this, because making mistakes usually teach us the best. But my little niece is 11, and so she has been raised with me, and she is the rooster whisperer in my life. This girl raises roosters. She can catch roosters. I'm 44 years old and I just had to phone her to catch George, my rooster, because everything was good until I was combining my barns. And now all of a sudden, George doesn't like me messing with his ladies. So if one of them cackles when I catch them on the bottom, he comes running up to that door and I can see that beak just waiting to grab my legs. So my little rooster whisperer is going to come in. And these are things that take a lot of time to nurture. And so does our relationship with our food. And so I get a lot of people who will sign up for my egg subscription and I love it, but I'm constantly saying I can't run the whole farm just on eggs. So can we talk about, what I can grow for you? But then it's one thing for them to agree to purchase the product. It's another thing for them to understand that if they want the product at a better rate, then they have to tell me what to grow for them. So I just today, for the first time, for my 2024 deposits, I actually put packages together because I'm like, ladies and gentlemen of the world, if I grow you 12, if you want 12 packages of chicken breasts for next year, that's 12 whole chickens I have to raise. And they all come with 2 legs and 2 wings and 2 thighs. So, that 12 breasts will give you 3 bags of thighs, 3 bags of wings, and kind of thing. But I sold my very first one today, right?
Cool.
So it's really a partnership of always having a unique conversation, right? Because people are intimidated by food.
Yeah.
It's exhausting to think about food. I have my one friend who says, I need to get a job so I can hire somebody to cook for me because I just can't cook. Like I can't do that anymore. And so I think as things get more difficult, people who are thinking in those 3, 5, 7, 10-year increments ahead are going to start demanding that we have access to a relationship with a farmer. Now, unfortunately, for people like myself, the Hutterites are really clouding that conversation, and that's a model that is very different and it's not an equal playing field. The product that you're getting from somebody like me is very different than that you'll get from a Hutterite. But also the overall farm is very different. And in some ways, what they do is fantastic. The community they have, the shared workload, but it's, it's unpaid labor versus paying fair wages. And so that's a piece of it, and particularly with women, but that's a delicate conversation and it's hard to have because, you don't want to diss the Hutterites. Last year, it was so funny because I did a genuine like Mandy style post where I'm like, I'm a single woman trying to make sure this land doesn't get sold into the big system with all the big farmers and the Hutterites who buy up a lot of land. And oh my God, it was like For the first time in my life, I got 500 likes on a post, and I'm like, oh my God. And some were like, oh, you're just in the HUDs. And the other one's like, no, she's not. She's just saying how she's different. Right. So
Right.
people love controversy more than they love peace. And I find that a bit interesting.
It's the joys of being a
Yeah.
farmer, though. It's
And
you're
so
always on and you're always talking to people and you're always trying to move your business
you're
forward.
always on. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that word working farm is a really big part of the conversation of what defines local food, because a lot of the conversation around government grants and tourism, and whenever a politician wants to sound like they know what they're talking about with food, which I'm convinced there's almost not one elected official in the Canada from the municipal level, provincial level, or federal level that actually understands food in the real way. They understand commodities and commodity organizations, but they don't necessarily understand food. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, totally. Big farmers versus local small farmers,
Yeah.
and just how it's different to be supporting different farmers. Like, even so in Vancouver Island, where I'm at, it's Amish, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of the farms are run by the Amish community. And now you see there's been a billboard since I was a child that's like Amish furniture store, even. And it's like closing down, going out of business. And I'm like, what is happening? What do you mean you're going out of business? You know what I mean? But it's exactly what you were
Well,
talking
that's where
about. There's no one to maintain those businesses and
actually, I know
farms.
where I was going now. I know where I was going with that political rant. So I'll just finish with that. But then I want to touch base on that Amish business, because really the issue is a dichotomy of online sales, which I will get to you in a second. But going back to this, all of these government, so many consumers think that us as small producers must just be loaded with government grants, which, like, I got one grant in my life, and that was for a website of $2,400, which we used to spend on increasing our SEO. And did it work? Maybe a little bit, but when the
Right.
money was gone, I could afford that, because then I'd have to raise my prices on my people, which I can't do. So I don't think they actually have an understand of how to overcome the barriers, and they frame everything through agritourism, which I know in BC you get a lot of that as well. And so this email that I got from this customer was, framed in that whole thing. And I'm like, no, but if you wanted your kids to learn how to pick eggs, I could definitely one day maybe do a course on that kind of thing. And so until people see us as an essential service, we will not see any change in people's relationship with small farmers, because right now they see us as something that can entertain them. And so the one area of retail that I find fascinating is that, we're up against Walmart now in the home delivery. It's like every time we get a little bit of good, then the big guys come in and just stump you, right? So now every chain of grocery store is doing home delivery. And so when you look at malls and you look at retail in general, so much of it is being done online. But when it comes to people's grocery store habits, they still like to go to the grocery store, and they like to look at that package of bacon or feel that apple. And I find that interesting, even with this guy asking me about a storefront. And I don't know if that's because if it's a trust relationship, like there's a whole pile of scammers and stuff like that. But the Amish, I would suspect, are closing because a lot of people aren't spending that kind of money on quality.
Right.
Love them or hate them, and it's going to be handmade. It's going to be good. Or maybe they're changing where, and it could be for the same reasons that the Hutterites here are opening more storefronts, and making it harder for us small guys that don't have all the resources that they have, So really, what does it come down to? It comes down to a couple of things. The consumer needs to do exactly what you did with your neighbor, who build a relationship. And if she can grow you an extra 20 chickens, then work with her on that. But every municipality could have strong local food policy.
Yeah.
Municipalities at every level in the prairies could have policy to say, we support this, and this is how we, what we can do to help support connecting consumers with small local farmers in their area. It really does take a political will, which is generally comes from the grassroots, right? If people in an area wanted to have strong local food policy, you have to build that movement, which is kind of where the 2024 campaign of Join the Hope Rebellion comes into play. Let's build a movement, but we got to stop beating around the bush.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of beating around the bush. There's a lot of people who like fluff.
Yeah. Well, here there's 12 local farms in Port Alberni. And when I first moved here, I was like, all right, where are my farmers at? Like, the very first thing that I purchased for myself was local honey, because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, like be a part of my community and support my farmers. And so I found a farmer that does honey because I'm like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And I bought some honey from them, but it's like $24 a jar, and I'm like, but I still have it. And I've lived here for 7 months, 8 months now. And I'm like, it's not like what I used to buy from the store that you'd go through so fast because you don't need as much, or it's like nice and sweet and it actually has medicinal properties versus it just being like corn syrup. It's so different when you start eating meat. Like even having your chicken, it would feed us as a family for like 6 meals, one chicken,
Yeah.
and yet you
Yeah.
go to the store and you buy a chicken and it's like maybe leftovers the next day, maybe, right? Versus it's just so crazy to me. So yesterday, me and my husband were having a conversation and he's like, okay, what I want you to do while I'm at work is I want you to find a farmer that'll grow us a cow. I'm like, okay, that's it. We're going to grow a cow. I'm like, okay, sounds good. And he's like, I just think that we should really focus on buying local meat. And I was like, yeah, totally. And my cousin, as a housewarming gift, went and bought me a gift certificate to a nursery. So I was able to go and buy like blueberry bushes and raspberry bushes and that kind of stuff and just get some lovely flowers for my pollinators. And I'm so excited to like finally this weekend, my sister's coming up and we're going to plant my garden because we
Yeah,
can
that's
here
fantastic.
because it's like mid-April. And I'm like, this is amazing.
So
There's not a foot of snow on the ground still. Like it blows my mind.
what's up? Where is Port Alberni exactly?
It's central Vancouver Island, so South
You're
BC.
in central Vancouver Island.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I
That
call it
sounds
paradise.
gorgeous.
Yeah, it's
Are
amazing.
you in paradise?
Yeah, it's like the
Good
hike
for
that I just
you.
did. Like I wish I could show you. I bet I can show you. Here, look at this. Just randomly. This is our hike today. It's me and my darling
I
husband.
love it.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I
just
love it.
like
Yeah.
mountains and water and nature and
Yeah.
it's so
Well, our girl
lovely.
is coming up there to visit her mom. So when Steph comes up there, how close are you to where Steph's mom's at then?
An hour.
Oh, so you get to see her then.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm so jealous
I'm so
in a
excited.
good way.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is good. I actually wonder if I can send you a care package through Steph if she's flying or driving. I'll ask her.
she's
I'll see her
driving.
next week. Okay.
And you know what I
I
learned
think,
this week? That you can
what did you learn?
travel on airplanes with whole foods like chicken, as
I
long
did not know that.
as it is not preserved in water or liquid. You can travel with meat and vegetables. So my husband is
Yeah.
commuting to Fort McMurray still. And so
Yeah.
every week he gets into Fort McMurray. He doesn't have a vehicle up there because he doesn't really need one.
Yeah.
So he goes from the airport to the grocery store home. And it's just like such a headache for him. Flight delays and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, he's like, I'm gonna make a phone call. I was like, okay. So he called WestJet and was like, what are the rules around bringing food with me? And so now he's shopping here, which saves us a ton of money because then we're shopping big orders, right? Like if I need to buy coffee, I'm
Yeah.
buying a box of coffee versus us buying individual like bags of coffee,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just way
For
smarter
sure.
for us to prepare our meals together. And then he can still prep his meals, like cut up his carrots and potatoes and whatever he wants to do. So last week he did a stew, right? So he took the beef roast as is, frozen. You have to have it defrosted, which is interesting. But so we pulled it out the night before and it was like semi defrosted just so they can make sure that it's not got anything in it, right? Like you're not trying to pack
Mhm.
drugs with you or something, but
Yeah.
they'll allow you to take that with you. And I was like, that is genius. So noted, that's something that we can potentially look at because then transporting food can be done via airplane, which is amazing. I had no
That
idea.
is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. That is super awesome. And it, really overcoming barriers is where the general conversation needs to go. We do need some of the big farmers. We do need them to take care of the soil and produce wheat that we
Yeah.
can eat, barley that we can eat, that isn't desiccated, right? If the farmer could, I firmly believe that if the big guys could do it without the additives, without all the genetics, without all the chemicals, they would. But they, like me, are just trying to make a living.
Yeah.
And so where do we build bridges? And how do we, have conversations that'll be more like you're right and I'm wrong and you're an asshole and I'm not, and and just be like, how can we all make it work? Because I can guarantee you that, subsidized corn by the US taxpayer that's being used for biofuels is not feeding the world.
Right.
Right. And so we have to, you know, just start having conversations just like this. Like, did you know that WestJet would let you move food on an airplane, which is brilliant. And that's just as important as you can meal plan, right? Like, you don't need to buy your proteins from the grocery store.
Right.
When you do that, you're making JBS and Cargill very rich. And I don't think they need more money. And this is how. Or when you buy that chicken that's done in 38 days, they want you to buy that chicken that's raised quickly so that you'll go in the grocery store and buy all those other things. So funny because people will pay $10 for a sub, but, bitch about paying $40 for a chicken that will feed them for 6 meals.
Right.
I wish that I had something much more sexy to talk about than the last time we talked, but we're still here. But at the end of the day, we're growing at a pace that is sustainable. Some people move like you guys did, and some people come out, but we maintain good relationships. And I've had a lot of my customers just say, Mandy, the way our budget is this year, we need to switch to the whole chickens because we can't afford the breasts. Totally fine. It's always about bridging that conversation and having it be fun. And I always like to ask people, what do your kids love to eat? When it's a family, and one of them's like the drumsticks. I couldn't believe I had a little 5-year-old that loves my drumsticks, right? Because they're thick and they're meaty, and that's so fun.
Talk about
And
those in an
if I
air
could
fryer.
oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
If I didn't have the threat of avian flu and the fear of all of that, I would love to do like little picking egg workshops for, little humans. I had my little nephew and I've got little laying hens right now that I'm raising. And I'm like, would you like to hold it? And he's like, would that hurt it? And I said, no, it's not going to hurt it. And so he holds it. I've never held a chicken before. And just that good energy, right? I feel bad for the kids in the city that don't always get access to that.
Yeah.
So the Hope Rebellion is really the theme for me on this one, my friend, because there's always a way to keep the money local, to keep the money from where your feed is coming from local, to where the meat is being processed local, to where your seed is coming from. I mean, one conversation I would love to have with you as your sister is coming to plant your garden this weekend is, whatever you plant, also think about where and how you're going to save those seeds, especially in the climate that you're in, and that's going to be super important as the genetics and intellectual property rights for those genetics continue to be debated by lobbyists and governments and trade agreements and all of these things that are heavy. Having our own seed and access to our own seed is super important.
Yeah.
And it's not really talked about, but it has a trickle down effect on everything we eat.
There's a seed exchange here every month. And I'm like, I love
every month.
Every month they do a seed exchange. So people can just like go and trade seeds with people. I was like, that is
Did you get a big house there by chance, just in case, we might have to go and have a little commune. One of the best books I read this year, I've read so many books already in 2024 that are so good, like The Nightingale, love it. But there's this one by Kristen Hanna called The Women. And it was about a woman who went and volunteered to be a nurse in the Vietnam War. And so many American women were completely ostracized when they got back. Even the veterans said, oh, there were no women in the war. So here, all of these females that participated, usually in the medical corps portion of it, had no support system. Right. So at the end of the book, I don't want to give it all away, but her and her comrades go to Montana, get a bunch of horses, and grow a lot of food. And at the end of the day, what we do is healing. It's not impossible. It's absolutely doable when you have somebody who's strong and wants to feed you good food. Yeah. There's always a way to make it work. What we need are the consumers to make a decision, simply make a decision that, I'm going to spend this much a month, just like your husband did, saying, I want to have a relationship with that food. And maybe you won't find somebody who has a whole cow because it takes a long time to raise a whole cow properly, right? But maybe you partner with other people and you get a half a cow. But planning is important. And when you make that decision, there are independents out here that need your support so that we can keep our land.
Right.
so that we can keep access to those seeds,
Mhm.
keep our independent processors going. There's a lot of wheels in those cogs. Is that okay? Yeah.
100%. Love that conversation. And guys, just know that there's people out there that want you to be thriving with your health. And that comes from your food. Everything you are what you eat. You've heard it before. What you eat impacts how you feel. If you don't want to get cancer, don't eat foods that give you cancer. Right?
Uric acid? What causes gout? Is it uric acid?
I think so.
I
Not
got it right because I said it wrong before. So my friend Jackie, I'm not sure if I told you this or if we talked about this in the last podcast, but when I first got all these beef, when I didn't get married and I came home with 80 beef and I thought, oh, I'm just going to rule the world of farmers markets. And then I realized I couldn't get into the farmers market in Edmonton because there was like a 10-year waiting list
wow.
because they're kind of political too. But so my friend Rachel says, well, you need to meet my friend Jackie. Jackie met me twice and she's like a homeschooler, this is way back then. And she's like, oh, I love this. I love having local food people. And I said, okay, good, because I got to make you a beef roast. I'm going to make some potatoes and dill and I'm coming to your house. And so she had never really met me for like more than an hour. And she let me, and she has this tiny little kitchen. And I brought roasts and I brought potatoes and I cleaned them in her sink and I chopped that dill and I made my potatoes and dill and cream and did the roasts. And she invited 35 of her homeschool friends
Cool.
and I fed them. And then I said, I need you all to give me $500 so I can keep growing this beef. And they did.
Right?
Right.
I love
Kind
it.
of like the Tupperware party movement. And that's the kind of stuff that we may actually have to start doing. And so Jackie, this is how the uric acid. So then Jackie phones me a couple months ago and she's reading this book. And this I find very frightening as I wolfed down pizza from my co-op that had some good meat, but I put ranch dressing on it because I like that with the crust. And I'm just telling you my little sins at the moment. We all have them, right? But she had said that in this book, they're calling Alzheimer's the third type of diabetes because of all of the hidden sugars in the corn syrup and in the food that we're eating, because the corn is replacing almost everything to do with sugar and it is in everything. It's just called a lot of fancy names. And I think that's really frightening. When you look at just how do you manage your weight in a world that even if you think you're eating it healthy, there's all of these different hidden definitions, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that's frightening to me.
My sister-in-law is making pork chops tonight and I'm doing keto because I'm doing 75 hard right now. And
Yeah.
it's literally the first ingredient is pork and the second ingredient is sugar. And I'm like, well, can't eat that. Like, it's crazy. I'm like, you wouldn't think of that when you just have pork, you know?
Yeah.
But it's what's on it. Sauce,
Yeah.
sugar.
Well, and the one thing is that it actually, there was in the study commonalities and examples of how that sugar affects our memory. Like sometimes I forget people's name when I'm talking to them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm only 44. What's going on? And I do think it has impacts that we might not actually see. And when I look at what young people are eating and all of the challenges, now often people will say, well, our parents said that our generation had the worst music and our generation had the worst work ethic and all of these things. And I'm like, no, our generation we were on the cusp of still having fairly good food. These guys, you look at somebody now who's 15 and I know how long that sugars campaign has been going and they've been exposed to an awful lot of sugar. And whether I don't know, that's a whole other podcast.
Right.
We could talk
Oh,
forever.
my friend Danielle, she's like trying to teach people how to create a better relationship with sugar and like not give in to those temptations because it's so easy to just binge eat sugar.
Well, I had 5 girls here for my niece's 16th birthday, and I had to go pull out 10 bags of my raspberries because, children really do live what they learn. And so when you teach them that you can have just as much fun eating raspberries as the ice cream. Now, to be fair, they still had ice cream, but they didn't have quite as much ice cream because they had the raspberries.
Right.
Right. And that part is pivotal. And I look forward to many more conversations.
Me too. Me too. So guys,
And
for Mandy, meadowcreekfarms.ca or .com?
.ca always.
.ca.
Always.
Love it. Okay.
Right.
I'll post
And
everything in the group chat in the show notes for you guys so you can get access to Mandy as well. She's doing good things in the world.
And then one thing I'm going to ask you one more favor is that I would love to do something with you for schools
Sure.
that we could actually get paid for.
Cool.
Can we think about that for as, before the end of 2024?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that you and I balance each other well. And
Definitely.
we could,
There's so much to be talked about, and I'm really passionate about helping kids as well. So
yeah. So
I
we
think
just
it
kind of break it down one step at a time.
takes an army, right?
Yeah.
I'll teach
But
them
even
about
like
money. You can teach them about food. Like,
yeah.
good to go.
One of my friends, she bridged from being like a assistant in Vegreville, like teacher's assistant, to becoming like a cosmetology teacher and this. And she's telling me about these health classes all the time. And she's really going over and above and bringing in great speakers. And I'm thinking there's got to be a way that we could fit into that without necessarily physically having to go. And I think what we do right here, we could make it very entertaining. We could talk about, how it could affect testosterone in those boys' ears.
Big
We
time.
find the right facts, right?
I had this
And it
conversation
does
with my
have it.
sister-in-law today, literally. I was like, did
Did,
you know that there's
did you?
atrazine in the water sometimes? Like, which is a testosterone blocker, which is probably why this person is so grouchy, or like this person is not having a sex drive, or, like it's crazy. So there's
I didn't
so
even know
much.
that that was,
Mm,
yeah.
Google what's in your tap water. Look it up. Stephanie is the one. Stephanie, much love.
Our staff?
She's the one who was like, filter your water, Alaina. Because on 75 hard, I'm drinking a gallon of water a day. Right. And she's like,
Yeah.
don't put that in your body unless you filter it. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, Google it. Google what's in your water. And I was like, okay, nope. Anyways. Okay. Well, we got to wrap it up because you
Aren't
got to
we
go.
so
But
lucky to have her? Aren't we so lucky to have her?
just an
Like,
incredible
I
human.
don't even know what my life would be like. And we fought, in the first couple of months we met each other. But we worked it out. We went
Yeah.
into a hot tub together, and people who hot tub together bond for life.
Yes.
So,
Agreed.
I
You
remember
just get
that.
to know
Yeah.
each other better. And it's like, this is what
Oh
I
yeah, it's
stand
so great.
for. I met her at
Yeah.
a bar. I was meeting a
I
client,
just
doing info gather, and she was sitting there with her dog, and I had my dog, and I was like, we're dog friends. It was great.
I don't even know what I would do with that girl.
Yeah.
And it's so good to see you.
Good to see
You
you.
look beautiful. And don't worry, you're going to do fine. It'll come off. You've been through a lot. Just keep moving. Drink that water.
Good.
Enjoy what you're eating.
Just like,
You look,
even it's come off my
yeah,
face. I'm down probably about 15 pounds now, and I'm only like 17 days in. It's
you
crazy.
look absolutely fantastic.
Thanks, man.
Okay, so we'll be
Talk
in
to you
touch
again.
then. Let me know
Yes.
how this goes.
Awesome.
I
Thanks so
treasure you.
much. Till next time,
Take
that's
care, you.
Pursuit of Relentless.
Till next time.
Signing out.